Welcome to Raised on D&D podcast. Raised on D&D brings you inspirational interviews with tips and strategies to enrich your family's gaming experience. Your host for Raised on D&D has been a dungeon master for over 30 years and a father to 3 gamers. Here is Nick Cardarelli.
Welcome back, gamers. I'm your host, Nick Cardarelli, and this is Raised on D&D. My next guest is originally from Maine, but currently lives and works in Charlotte, North Carolina. You know her as the Dungeon Master for Clinical Role, a live play D&D game in which all of the players are psychologists and or therapeutic GMs. Please welcome the brilliant Dr. Megan Connell. Hi, Dr. Megan.
Hi, nice to be here. I'm so excited.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. We want to dive a little bit more into your backstory, as it were. When was it that you started playing Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role?
Yeah, so we're going to go in the Wayback Machine to middle school. I don't know what edition I played because this was back in the day when, you had the books and you wrote your character sheets out on notebook paper. And so my friends I had a couple friends who were dungeon masters, and so they had books and they told me what to write down on my notebook paper. And we would just play, but playing usually quickly, divulged into us just talking about Monty Python or making up our own spells and things. And it was so much fun, and we just enjoyed it. And we all were humongous Tolkien nerds and really into Star Wars. And so we had lots of lightsaber swords in D&D and all kinds of stuff, and it was super fun. Then I took a way too long hiatus from it through all the way through grad school, and I had gotten married and I started watching Will Wheaton's Titan's Grave, The Ashes of Elkanah.
Yes, me and my family are huge fans of Titan's Grave. That was
so
a
good.
Wonderful show. Oh my goodness. So,
it was so well done, and I loved the system. And I have to say too, having run a live play show and then watching what they did with the editing of that show and bringing it down to 45-minute episodes, it's such a great onboarding process for new players to show them what this game can be like. And so I actually bought Fantasy Age. I started running a game for my family. And then we started watching Critical Role. And I remembered how much I loved playing Dungeons & Dragons in middle school. And so we bought the starter set, and then we quickly wanted to make our own characters. So we bought all the core books and ran through the Lost Mines of Phandelver. And then I joined a Sunday night campaign, which actually this past Sunday we had our last battle, our level 20 capstone battle. We're having one more game where we get to do the epilogue of each of our characters, but we've been playing for 4 years, the same characters, the same campaign, level 2 through 20. So it was it's absolutely amazing.
Oh my goodness. I personally have been gaming for 30 years now, and I have never taken a character from level 1 to level 20. That is incredible. So what a great accomplishment. And this group is made up of who?
Strangers on the internet, honestly. We
really
all joined a game on Roll20 through looking for the group. We had a game with an awful dungeon master, but we all started messaging each other after the first game, and we're like, that dungeon master was terrible, but you seem pretty cool, so let's all play together. And so one of the players volunteered to DM, and then we just started playing, and we were all very dedicated to showing up every week and role-playing and getting into character and enjoying it. And these 4 strangers all became real. Well, 2 of us weren't strangers, my husband and I, but are in the game, so we weren't strangers. But the other players have all become really good friends. Our dungeon master got married last year, and my kids were in his wedding. We became really good friends, and we still play together every week, and we chat throughout the week. And it's been a wonderful way to, really have a strong relationship with other people.
That is phenomenal. Strangers on the internet 4 years ago, attending each other's wedding 4 years later.
Yeah.
And so your husband plays too. Now, is he a big gamer? Was he in? How did that happen? Or did you introduce him to Dungeons and Dragons?
No, we're both humongous geeks. That is one of our things. We will sit down and have, when we were dating, we would have deep discussions about the intricacies of time travel and space travel and the probability of actually getting to travel through wormholes. We are big time nerds and geeks. So, his game was Shadowrun when he was younger. So we do.
Shadowrun, so much fun. Dark, gritty. It's got
Yep.
the magic. It's got the tech. Oh, Shadowrun's wonderful. And so he was a big Shadowrun guy.
Yes, yeah, he's a Shadowrun guy, but he's gotten into D&D. We play in the Sunday game together. We were playing a Ravenloft game right now as well. And he's Dungeon Master before, so we kind of pass that back and forth. But we have a lot of fun playing as a family. Like, gaming is a very big cornerstone of the family here.
That is fantastic. And now, now you guys are parents. How many children do you guys have?
4.
Oh, congratulations. And
Thank you.
how old are they?
So my older 2 are my additional kiddos. They are 17 and 16 now.
Okay.
They keep getting older, and this is it's scary. And like, my oldest is super excited right now because they're going to be dungeon mastering for a friend's birthday party. And so like, I'm getting text messages of like, how many kobolds is too many kobolds for this encounter? However many you want. There is no such thing as too many kobolds.
No such thing as too many kobolds. It's just what I was going to say.
Just you always
all of them.
Yeah. Then our 17-year-old was actually part of the D&D club at his high school. Was trying to DM games, but quickly realized what happens when you get stretched too thin, that you can't, but enjoys playing and goes and will play with his friends a lot of times, and they play a lot of board games together. And then my youngest 2 are 5 and 6. They like the D&D books, so I've gotten the little choose your own adventure books, and then the smaller books that are for kids, the little Dungeon Masters book, and they love thumbing through those and looking at the pictures. My youngest wants to be a high elf. Every time she sees pictures of them, she says, "Mommy, I'm going to be that." Okay. But we have played No Thank You Evil together. We're working on a My Little Pony adventure. Due to COVID, they're not going back to school face-to-face. They're doing online schooling.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to run a My Little Pony game for them as sort of an augment to school as well, since that's going to be reading and math and problem solving and all of that stuff. And they really like Equestria Girls. So I think we're going to, halfway through the year, they're going to transition from ponies to Equestria Girls, and we might move to like a more kids on bikes, kids on brooms situation. But
wonderful.
We'll see.
Wonderful. And how old were your older 2 when you introduced them to tabletop role-playing games and Dungeons and Dragons?
So they were part of the Fantasy Age game that we were playing. So that was back in 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I can do math. 11 was 10 and 11. And they were great. They were awesome players with it. Like, we had to help them with the math and stuff, but they got into the role playing, they got into the problem solving, utilizing their characters, and the dice, of course. Everybody loves the dice. So it's been a blast playing with them.
When did you decide that it would be suitable for your younger 2 to start playing tabletop role-playing?
It was never like a when are they suitable. It was more a when are they going to have enough ability to sit down for it. I've been trying to introduce them to it for a while. When I talked at PAX East in, must have been 2017 or no, it was 2018. I bought them their first set of big dice so that they would not swallow them. They were still at that age then. But they love playing roll the dice. They love playing with my minis and telling stories with the minis and getting them all lined up and doing that. I've taken a little bit of a leaf from Patrick Rothfuss's book, because he talked about with his son that rather than doing like dice rolling and things, it's just storytelling. And so at nighttime, telling them stories. And I do that with my younger kids, where we'll sort of just narratively tell a story together. They come up with a character and we'll stick with that character for a while. It's like, okay, so you two, where do your characters go today? It's like, to the candy forest. Okay, so we're in the candy forest, and in the candy forest we run across something magical and amazing. What is it? And just practice that back and forth and yes-anding and trying to teach that flexible thinking. So it's been a lot of fun.
That's incredible. And that's mine. But mine, by the way, are little stair steps. They're about 17 months apart. They're 14, 13, and 11 going on 12. Same kind of thing. The way it all started was they liked, we did story time at bedtime. And they always wanted stories with their favorite franchises, but then they wanted mashups because no one can agree on anything, of course. So yes. I'm sitting there telling stories about Captain Kirk and the Star Trek crew and the Scooby Gang all together on an adventure. And then the story, my oldest, who is always been very assertive, would gently take over the story and let us know that that's not how it goes. It goes like this, and that sort of thing. So the questions started coming in. Well, what do they do next, and where do we go? And then they wanted to be in the story. So now they're them with their favorite heroes on an adventure, and that sort of thing. And then from there, we made it to the table. What do you feel are the biggest benefits of role playing with children and teens?
Oh, so many. The biggest ones are just like all of them. Undivided attention of your kids. Like, I think for me as a player, that's the thing I love the most. I do a lot. I have a private practice. I run groups. I write chapter. I feel braggy when I talk about it, but it's more like I just get overwhelmed. And so the gift of having undivided attention, like the conversation you and I are having, this is so rare where people are like fully giving attention and not checking phones and not checking email and doing all these other things. And so getting to sit down with your kids and having that undivided attention and building those memories and talking it through. I think it's so wonderful to give us these teachable moments in D&D to help learn what to do in different situations. And like learning that there are consequences to our actions, learning problem solving, understanding complex relationships like with NPCs and how to get information, who to trust, who not to trust. Again, that creative problem solving is such a huge one, but also cooperation and learning how to work together and work off of each other. That idea of yes and or yes but, it's or no but, and it's just wonderful skills for them to have. And then also the fact that we're including reading and mathematics and looking up things and trying to understand, it's not just reading words, but it's reading comprehension. I cast this spell. What does it do? I don't think it does that. Let's read the spell, and reading through and working on that comprehension. Because that's the thing I've noticed. It seems kids seem to be very good at reading, but the comprehension doesn't seem to be where I always expect it to be when I'm running games for kiddos. And so that's a really interesting piece, that learning to read the fine print of the spells can be really helpful in getting that comprehension piece there as well. But it's a time to build memories with your kids. They grow up so freaking fast. And to be able to sit down and, talk through a memory. And like, the thing I'm so fascinated as a psychologist about with D&D memories is we don't say, do you remember when our characters did this thing? It's, do you remember when we did this thing?
Yes.
And like there was this spoilers for Critical Role Campaign 2 episode, whatever they were just on. But there was a big, humongous reveal where Matt revealed that one of the NPCs they met was related to a character from campaign 1, and that player didn't. So it was Merceray's character. She went, "Is that my mom?" And what was so fascinating is like, she's not playing that character anymore, so it's not her current character's mom, but she still had that emotional connection with that character, say mine instead of Keyleth. And it's so fascinating of like, what is that where we feel that invested in this story that it is us. And so what a wonderful way to build a bonding moment with your kids than to go on this epic adventure where you're going to defeat the giants and get the treasure and save the kingdom and do all these things. It's so wonderful to be able to go on those kind of quests with your kids.
And people who are gamers understand that so well. We know that we have built friendships with people from school and from other social aspects, brought them to the game table, and just created bonds that have lasted years. There are people that I game with that I gamed with in high school, and that's because those memories that we build together, that battle buddy thing that we get from going on those adventures together, it lasts. And to be able to have that kind of bond with your children is amazing. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. And even now, I've been gaming with my children almost a decade. And when we talk about our adventures, that's the kind of verbiage they use. Remember when I did this? Remember when we did this? You get funny looks when you're talking like that in a restaurant. But, but
Do you remember that time we all went and fought that lich together, and then he cast that spell? And like,
yes, and you hit him with your axe and killed him. Yeah, you get some funny looks in public. But what a wonderful way to bond. And you're absolutely right. The COVID-19 lockdown and social distancing have been hard on kids and teens. I mean, it's been hard on us adults as well. None of us have ever been through anything like it, but it's been very hard on kids. Do you have any advice for parents who are seeking to find socialization opportunities for their kids through online gaming?
yeah, don't be afraid of it. Really, like, are there some creeps and horrible people out there? Of course, but there's creeps and horrible people everywhere. The people are on the internet. You're going to get good and bad. And a lot of these places do a really good job of trying to create safe spaces. I know Roll20 really works hard to try and make sure that they can have some safe spaces. Of course, there's going to be some bad games. You want to try to vet the dungeon master first and stuff, but there's so many ways to play and just to play, and it makes all the difference. I'm a psychologist. I'm in private practice, and actually an young adult client of mine has really been struggling with socializing, and that was their homework assignments last week. Was they're on a D&D Discord server, and I was just like, join a game. I don't care if you don't like it, like, just join one and tell me how it went. And this week, half of our session was them telling me this amazing story of this game and how they played for 2 hours extra because they were all having so much fun and just all this intrigue. And like, so you got to talk with people, and it was like, yes. And it was so much fun, and it was so wonderful. And so just like it's taking that risk. And, as parents, we have to teach our kids responsibility online. But like, kids are smart these days. It's not like when I was a kid and the internet was a brand new thing and like you were trying to figure it out. But like, I'm thinking back even as I was a kid, I was like, I'm not telling where I am and like doing all this stuff. Like, saying East Coast is kind of enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, but, teaching like, how do we keep things private? What's acceptable? What's not acceptable? Teaching boundary setting. And it's hard. But you can find groups for kids. Also, like, if you have like a group of kids who want to play and you need a dungeon master and you as a parent aren't willing to, there are, people who are professional dungeon masters out there who, you pay them to run groups for you. But usually, like, if between 4 or 5 people, it's not going to be very much. And usually it's 2 to 3 hours that your kid is engaged with other people and talking and playing. And there's more and more people out there doing what I do, which is therapeutic dungeon mastering, where my groups are therapy. It's not just playing, it's playing with a purpose. It's playing intentionally. My groups are all girls. There's Game to Grow out in Seattle, and they do groups internationally now that are mixed gendered, and also the Bahana group. And then there's more and more people in private practice all across the country running therapeutic DMing groups, and it's super fun. So like with my groups with all girls, one of the things I'm working on is them finding their voice and learning how to be assertive, learning how to say no, how to stand up for themselves, how to create boundaries. And it's so much fun to see these girls go from being timid to blossoming and to coming out of their shell and, deciding to play like these humongous orcs or whatever, and just going into battle and being in battle together and doing this stuff. It is beautiful to see the growth that happens. And, especially if you're trying to decide if like a regular playing group versus a therapy group is right for your kiddo, essentially are we worried about some sort of vulnerability with the kiddo? Are they on the autism spectrum? Do they have ADHD? Do they have bad social anxiety? Have they been struggling with depression? And if they're really actively struggling with some of those things, maybe going into more of a therapeutic space is better. But if they're not, then like kind of just playing can be really great.
I think it's wonderful the work that you're doing with young girls and young adults, helping them find their confidence in their voice. One of my very first episodes, I actually interviewed my 14-year-old daughter and asked her what growing up around the game table and what Dungeons and Dragons did for her. And one of the biggest things that she cited was the fact that it gave her choices. She said, I started when I was very young, and in those days I was told what to eat and what to wear and where to go and when to go to bed. And she said, and then when I sit down at the table, I got to play. She always loved playing, the beautiful elf character, right? Little girls love that. And she says, I got to play a character and I was treated like a young woman. And I was asked, you're an adult in the game. So what do you do and how do you handle these situations? And that ability to be able to make those choices, to make those decisions, whatever the consequences ended up being, and learning from that empowered her. And the fact that you're doing that for young girls is incredible. And Dr. Megan, they also can follow you on your podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I host a podcast called Brain Noodles. It's myself and some of my other psychology friends. And it's us talking about gaming and psychology and just the random discussions of the day. We have talked about such deep and meaningful topics as office supplies. We have many discussions on Animal Crossing. Going back, we recently talked about going back to school. During the whole COVID pandemic, we talked about graduation and ceremonies and the importance of that and what it means to not have a graduation ceremony. So it's really fun. My co-hosts are Dr. Rachel Cohart. She's a research psychologist associated with Take This. Dr. Kelly Dunlap. She is she has her doctorate in psychology, and she's also got her master's in game development, and she develops video games and teaches game design and stuff. And then Dr. Sarah Hayes, she's a psychologist who also is affiliated with Take This. And then our producer is Amelia Hurst, who is going into her clinical internship and will be doctor soon enough. So I'm very excited. She's our producer, and she's sometimes on as a guest as well. And we have a lot of fun, and we just chat and enjoy talking about the different things our brains are noodling about every week.
Wonderful. And so Brain Noodles can be listened on all the podcast listening apps?
Yes, it can.
Great. Fantastic. And I hope people are checking out and following Brain Noodles as well. At what point did you decide to integrate your love for role-playing games with your therapy sessions?
It came pretty early on. So this was, we had just started playing the Roll20 game with, my now really good friends, and we had finished up our home game of Lost Mines of Phandelver. And so I was thinking about the two characters that I had been playing and kind of going, they seem really different, but they both came from my brain. So there has to be some commonality. And I was at first quite impressed at my character development because I could not find any commonality. And then it hit me what the commonality was. So that ego pump up came crashing down quickly. But then I also realized, like, whoa, this was a core issue of mine. This was a wound that needed healing that I was having my characters play through. I was like, I need to use this, because I was like, that would have taken me years to play out in therapy, like to find that in individual therapy, just talking through and trying to figure it out. Because like our really deep wounds, we learn how to adapt and survive, right? Like we figure it out. We become like wild animals who are wounded, right? We disguise the wound. We find ways to work around it and to hide it. We build all these defense mechanisms and denial and things over them. And so sometimes it can be really hard to figure out what our core issues are. What are the things we really need to work on? And role-playing games have this amazing way at coming at those things sideways. So they like bypass all the defenses, and it's just like, there it is. And it's like, okay, let's work on this. Let's walk through it. Let's see what it is. And it's really interesting because there's that emotional distance from you to the character. It doesn't feel like you, even though it is you. Mm-hmm. And so it feels a little safer to be discussing someone's commitment issues or their fear of abandonment or their great desire to please their parents, and feeling, like it's no, that's not me. That's not me. That's my character has those issues. And we could talk about it in this safe way and to be thinking, okay, what does your character need to heal that issue? What are the things that they need? And we can role play that out. And then that gives us some tools to find it in our real life.
So it gives the player that insulation to address those issues. How has your Dungeons and Dragons therapy sessions, how do you feel they have changed from when you started them 5-6 years ago to now?
Oh, they've changed a lot, and they're going to continue to change. So it's weird being at the pointy head of a spear. I mean, I'm not the only one using D&D therapeutically. Nor am I the first. I am one of the first to be very vocal about it, though. Myself, Dr. Boca Mazzaro, Adam and Adam from Game to Grow, Jack Birkenstock from Bohana Group, we've in many ways been a lot of the people at the front of this. And so it's a lot of what dungeon mastering really is, which is you're laying down the tracks as you go, right? We've been figuring it out as we went. And we think we've kind of figured out a good system now. Dr. Boca Mazzaro and I have actually developed a 6-hour training for professionals on how to use tabletop role-playing games therapeutically.
Wow.
But it's changed a lot. So it started off, I'm an anxious person, so I hyper-planned everything. And I had like this big overarching story and all this stuff we were going to do and these different themes we were going to hit. And we did it. And it certainly was therapeutic and powerful. But it was a lot of stress and I was exhausted all the time, which was not fun. I also learned from my friends, like we are very cooperative with each other and we steal from each other liberally. And Adam and Adam have this system called the collaborative homebrew system. And I've started using it, and it's probably what I'm going to use mostly going forward. It's you draw a very bad outline of a map and maybe put a terrain feature or two on, and then everybody else gets to add terrain features, and we name everything, and then we start building rumors and stories around that map. And then the group votes on the stories that they think are the most interesting and that they'd like to explore, and then you build the adventure around that.
That is beautiful. I mean, that's wonderful. I mean, how much better to get the buy-in of the players, because as a dungeon master, you don't have to feel like a salesman selling your setting or your story. You're all cooperatively creating it together and then choosing which veins you want to explore. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's a wonderful system. It's available on DriveThru RPG if you just search up Collaborative Homebrew from Game to Grow. I think it's a pay what you want to because they're a nonprofit. Please pay something though, because they do amazing work and I want them to be able to continue doing their amazing work. It's just a great system. It's a lot of fun and it lets you know what people are interested in and interested in exploring. And it's really fun. And like, that's sort of what I do now with my own kids is, very, very dumbed down in a lot of ways where it's, we're not building a whole world. We're in a magical forest. Okay, what do we see over here? And now we're going to go explore that. And, you're getting their interest in figuring out what their thing is that they're bought into. And that's super fun. And because I was very heavy handed with what I was doing as a dungeon master early on. It's like, this is the week where we're going to learn about toxic friendships and how to get out of them. And it was good. I think people really learned a lot. They did tell me they learned a lot, but as I've eased up and been able to improve my ability to improvise and to go with what comes up, the stuff that's come up has been way more powerful and meaningful and just interesting. I think the biggest guidance I could give to people wanting to be dungeon masters is learn about stories and learn how to improvise.
Yes.
I have become a humongous fan of the YouTube channel Hello Future Me. He talks about tropes and world building and design and thinking about magic systems. And then also Overly Sarcastic Productions. They do deep dives into histories and trope talks. And it really helps you kind of think about story and what makes a good story and how to balance the story around your players really well. And the more you learn this stuff and understand these tropes on a very deep level, the better you are at it. I came to the path of being a psychologist via jazz. I was originally going to be a music therapist, but I play the guitar badly. That is my guitar back there. Again, the listeners can't see it, but there's a guitar behind me. I am very bad at playing it. I enjoy playing a couple of songs, but that's about all I can do. So being a music therapist was not for me. Uh, but I went to Berklee College of Music in Boston and learned a lot about jazz. And one of the big things with jazz is you have to learn a ton of music theory and music design. We didn't at Berklee, we didn't take math, but music theory is its own form of math and equations and understanding chord progressions and what notes can go where, because the art of jazz is the art of knowing how to break the rules for the most effect possible. And it's learning like
Dr. Megan, say that one more time. That's an amazing quote. The rule of jazz. Tell me it again.
Yeah, it's knowing when and how to break the rules for the greatest effect.
Wow, that has to be that should be on a Dungeon Master T-shirt. I'm telling you right now, how and when to break the rules for the greatest effect. That's beautiful. Absolutely, that's so great. I'm so sorry. Keep going.
Oh no, it really is, because like if you listen to a really accomplished jazz musician when they're doing a solo, they of course are going off of the melody of the music and they'll follow the chord progression, but then they'll break it. But when it's getting to this point where you're kind of like, where are they going? They come back in and they ease back in, and like they do. And it's understanding how the ear processes music and what we do. And like when you could appreciate music theory and hearing this kind of stuff, it's really fascinating. Like during quarantine, we've been watching Hamilton a bunch because it's amazing. And Lin-Manuel is a freaking musical genius. My favorite song in the whole musical, though, I think is Wait For It, because it follows some of the rules of jazz. There's this beautiful part where it is building up to the chorus and you don't get it. You get another verse. You have to wait for it. So it's like built into even the musical structure of the song, and it's so beautifully done. But learning that stuff and learning that comfort with the rules, that comfort with story, right? Like learning these story tropes, it's like, okay, so this is the part of the story where usually this would happen, but I'm going to break that trope in this way for this effect to happen. That it's really incredible, and that it feels good, and you want to be doing this as second nature. Of course, it's going to be clunky and awkward and weird as you learn, because nobody starts off an expert, which is really hard because there are so many live streams with so many amazing dungeon masters out there, and you watch and you're like, I can't do that. Like, you just start and you figure it out, and you get to your however many thousands of hours you can get to, and then you're doing it. You're playing jazz.
Wow. Well, how beautiful the jazz analogy for dungeon mastering. I love it. You're recently signing people up for your fall therapeutic Dungeons and Dragons sessions. Can you tell us a little bit about that and tell our listeners how they can contact you, how they can get involved?
Yeah. So I run 10-week sessions through my practice at Southeast Psych. So they can check out my website. It's just meganpsyd.com. And all the information for my groups and how to get in contact to sign up is on there. Right now, because of COVID, they're all going to be online. And so fortunately, because I'm licensed in a few states, I am able to cross state borders for these groups. But so there's a few things that happen. So I have to explain the therapy stuff a bit, that because I think it can be confusing as a consumer to understand how things work, because it's like, oh, well, it's just online. What does it matter? I can be anywhere. So those of us who are licensed and providing therapeutic games, we have to be licensed in the state that our clients are in. So if my client is in Florida, I have to be licensed in Florida, even if I am geographically located in North Carolina. So I am licensed in North Carolina, Virginia, and Washington. So I'm able to practice in those 3 states. Hopefully more coming soon. There's something called the Psych Pact that's going to open up licensure for probably 24 states, which would be absolutely amazing. But for right now, I can only offer in those states. And now, like you heard me say earlier, that Game to Grow is offering international groups. Their groups are skills groups. They are not therapy groups.
Okay.
And so a skill group doesn't have to follow the same restrictions as having a licensed provider. Skill groups also don't have to follow HIPAA. So skill groups often will utilize a platform such as Discord for between game chat, for video and everything like that. As I run therapy groups, I cannot use Discord because it is not HIPAA compliant. I have to
Okay.
use HIPAA compliant software. So there's a lot more limitations. I was on a podcast recently, I'm not remembering which one, where there were two people who ran skill groups and two of us who ran therapy groups, and talking about the challenges that we face. And like the skill groups, it's a lot easier for them right now because they're like, yeah, we're on Discord, it's awesome, and like we're seeing better stuff. And like those of us who are running therapy groups were like, we'd love to be on Discord because it's awesome, but we can't because that violates, you know, all these privacy rights and everything, and so we can't do that. So there's some challenges there. So just to kind of understand, like if you're somebody who lives in Montana, say, and you're like, wow, this sounds great, I would love to get my daughter in, and I would love to see them, but I'm not licensed in Montana, so I can't. But we're hopefully we're working on getting reciprocity and going that way. But I run groups for girls ages 11 and up. I try to break up by age group a little bit, so I try to be very flexible with the ages. And it's not a thing of like, I don't think an 11-year-old can play with an adult. It's just the themes get changed.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that an older adolescent can have for themes in their game are a little different than the themes I have for a middle schooler. And so that's the primary reason. Like I honestly love seeing the dynamic of older girls with younger girls together, because there's a lot of big sistering and taking under my wing. And then when the younger girls have a character who's more powerful than the older girls, that's really fun too. But yeah, I have a group. So I have a middle school group, essentially like 11 to 14, 15, and then a high school group, so 15 to 19-ish, and then 20 and up are the groups that I run. So one thing too I want to make clear is, even though I've talked about like how we use therapy with D&D, if you are not a trained psychologist or therapist, do not use D&D as a therapy tool. You can open a box of worms that can do a lot of harm. With my players in a therapy group, I have their consent to directly work on therapeutic issues. And we talk about what we're working on. We do a lot of debriefing as we play. There is a lot that goes into it, a lot goes into any game, but therapeutic games, there's a lot more that is there. And so just because you know your friend has trauma, or you know your friend has some social anxiety, it is not appropriate to weave that into the story without their consent. If they come to you and say, I would like an opportunity to stand up for myself through playing D&D, and you feel comfortable with that and they feel comfortable with that, that is different. But do not try to force your friend to work on their trauma through playing, or try to be their therapist. Certainly help your friends though. One thing that I've done that I'm very proud of is I have a series called Psychology at the Table through my company Geeks Like Us that I co-founded with Dr. Ryan Kelly and Dr. Jonathan Anslow. And that's the point of that series, was to give dungeon masters tools to understand what they might be seeing in their players. Not to make them therapists, to try to be as explicitly clear about that as possible. But like, if you are working with a player and they have PTSD and they're having a flashback experience at the table, what will you see? What will be your clues that they're struggling? If somebody's having a panic attack, if someone has mathematics disorder, if someone's on the autism spectrum, what are the behaviors that you're going to see? And what are some ways that you can do to help support your friend? Again, not to be a therapist, but to be a good friend and to understand tools, the tools that you have. And so I'm really proud of that series. I've gotten some wonderful feedback from some people of how some of the videos have really helped them and their groups and understanding and how to connect with each other. Hoping to get a season 3 of it going. I had to get a lot off my plate in order to get that back on, but it's probably one of my prouder accomplishments that I've done. So definitely, if you are interested in that, check it out. It's on the Geeks Like Us YouTube.
And I love Geeks Like Us channel, and I have gotten to watch several of those videos. And having dungeon mastered for almost 30 years, there were a lot of things that I learned from your videos that I wish I had learned 30 years ago. And there were things that, you know, as a dungeon master, sometimes you get sucker punched, I guess is a good word to use, because like you said, you'll hit a nerve just through running the game, and you don't realize what is happening in the player, and the player starts acting a certain way.
On Clinical Role, I check in with my players a lot. I do hit a lot of emotional points with my players in Clinical Role, and you'll see that, but that's one of the things. I have their consent as players, and there's a lot of trust between us. And with all of us being psychologists and therapists, we are very good at talking about our boundaries and talking about our emotions. And like, there was one game that was very emotional and heavy, and one of my players signed off pretty quick because he was going to dinner with his family. And I texted and called him the next day and I was like, hey, that was a really emotional game and you seemed really upset. I just want to make sure that was that in character, or was there some bleed into you as well? And it was like, no, that was a great session. Like, thank you though for checking. And so there's a lot of checking in. And I think one of the things from psychology at the table and kind of into playing too is like, as a dungeon master, if you feel like maybe I should check in with my players about that, you should check in with your players about that. You know, I think it's always better to check in too much than to not check in at all.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
stuff happens. Like, we hit nerves. Sometimes we intentionally do it and go, whoops, I shouldn't have done that. Or we unintentionally just go, okay, this thing happens. And one of the players, you know, has a moment. One really great tool I want to point people towards too, Monte Cook's Consent in Gaming. It is free. Like, you do have to add it to your cart on the Monte Cook store, but then when you go to checkout, there is no price because you just download it. It is beautiful. It has a one pager at the very end that you can give to your players where they can say like, I don't like spiders, or please don't harm puppies. And it's really lovely because that way you have this clear idea with your players of what's expected and what's not expected. And since this show is geared towards parents and families playing together, this is also a wonderful way to start teaching your kids about consent and teaching them boundary setting, is to print out this one pager and to sit down with them and say like, okay, so we're going to have a story. We're going to tell a story. What things do you not want to see in your story? And again, like you were saying with your daughter, if I have control, I have options.
Mm-hmm.
This is, again, teaching your children that they have a voice and that it matters and that they can set a boundary and that you will respect that boundary.
And I think what's so sad is I remember when Monte Cook put that out for free. And initially, like everything on the internet, it came with a hefty shovelful of controversy. Some would say needless controversy. But it came with all this controversy. And I remember in my early 20s as a young adult running games for sometimes strangers at conventions. I don't know why, but I thought that a good plot device would be a stolen baby from a caravan that they were guarding. And I thought, well, this is wonderful because the heroes will, will be definitely motivated to save the baby. The dice didn't work out, and the baby didn't get saved in time. And as a 20-year-old dungeon master, I had no idea that that kind of plot device could be triggering trauma for the people at my table. It is a very serious thing. But I just thought of what would be a good storyline. And I never even considered that someone would sit down at the game and what happened in the story would affect them emotionally. And I was wrong again. So those are the kind of things that in Monte Cook's Consent in Gaming sheet, those are one of the things on there. Don't put a plot device in there about harming children or young people, right? And so when this controversy came up and people were like, oh, this is silly, this is unnecessary, that kind of thing, I felt it may be silly if you're gaming with people that you've known for 20 years. It may be silly if you are gaming with people who all share very similar life experiences and very similar worldviews. But when you start mixing the table up, whether it's online or it's at game conventions, it can get messy unintentionally. And I think it's socially responsible of a dungeon master to take that into account. So thank you for pointing out that's a wonderful tool, and I hope people use it, especially when you've got new players at the table or you're in a situation where random players can sit down at your table.
Yes, most definitely.
Dr. Megan, thank you again. So wonderful to have you on the show. We hope to have you back on again. We're looking forward to all the things that you're doing, all the great stuff. We hope that people are going to get in on your sessions, and we really hope that D&D in therapy mushrooms out. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.